Hey wrestling fans, what's up? It's the J-Man here, and today you're in for a treat because I'm about to read you from a book that I got. It's a 3-part book about WWF talent, and it's as you can see right here. I'll show you the book. It's a 3-part book. Even though it's backwards, you can kind of get the idea. This first part here is a story or tales written by classy Freddie Blassie. And then you have the second part, which is written by Jerry the King Lawler about his career as well. And the final part is written by superstar Billy Graham. So we have these 3 stories packed into one book. I'm just going to read you an excerpt that I thought was interesting from classy Freddie Blassie's input here, his story. This part is actually Jim Myers talking, a.k.a. George the Animal Steel. And he's going to tell us a story, some opinions about a guy named Haystacks Calhoun, in reference and reflection of classy Freddie Blassie. And I'll just get right to it and start reading. He says, "The McMahons understood Freddie, and he understood them. And that's not always an easy job. Vince Jr. has about 7 personalities, and 5 of them are pretty good. Don the Magnificent Morocco and I used to call him Sybil. Even though Freddie was getting older, I loved watching him work. In those days, you wouldn't really know the details of your match until you got to the ring. The heels and baby faces were in different dressing rooms, and some would come in where you were and tell you the finish and possibly how the match would start. So the heel usually ended up leading the babyface through the match, beating him up and selling like hell when the babyface made the comeback. Freddie was a master at setting the pace, so the babyface just had to follow along. If Blassie didn't like you, though, you were in trouble. Haystacks Calhoun had heat with Freddie for years. Blassie thought he was a lazy worker and a pain in the ass. We were at a TV taping one time in Hamburg, Pennsylvania, and Calhoun left his truck. He was too big to drive a car. Stacks had his little chihuahua with him all the time, and he kept him in the truck, the window slightly open, while Freddie went over to the window and fed the dog X-Lax. About 15 minutes later, the dog shit on the upholstery. Freddie went over to the windows and tapped it. "Come here, Jules, come here." The dog ran through the slimy shit over to Freddie. Then Blassie went to the other side of the car, tapped the window again so the dog would track more shit in the truck. By the time Haystacks came out at the end of the night, that truck was a total shit wagon. He and his wife must have spent 2 hours cleaning it. Calhoun just thought the dog was sick. No one ever told him it was Blassie. Okay, so I thought that was pretty funny. Now Blassie's going to start talking, and he's going to basically speak about Haystacks Calhoun. And he says, "My disdain for Calhoun only went so far. He kept his little dog in his bed, and I was sad to hear that he'd rolled onto it. He crushed the poor animal to death. In 1989, Haystacks died after a long bout with diabetes. Earlier, he'd had his leg amputated, and I was told that he didn't come out of the house for a long time. When he received a letter from a wrestling fan, it made his week. Calhoun was only 55 when he passed away, and that's too young. He might have been an aggravating prick, but I took no pleasure in his misery." Okay, and now Blassie's just going to talk about Andre the Giant. He's going to give a little story about him, personal experience here, and this is pretty entertaining. Alright, I'm going to start reading. He says, "Actually, Andre had legitimate friends, like Golden Boy Arnold Scalland and referee Tim White. A few of the other boys, though, socialized with Andre only because he picked all the tabs. In other words, he would pay for the bill at the dinner table. Sometimes I felt that he was trying to buy friendship, but it wasn't my business to get involved. After the matches, Andre never wanted to call it a night. He'd keep people in the bar with him, demanding, 'One more, boss,' if they said they weren't tired. I believe that he had some kind of ill feeling that he was going to pass away in his sleep, so every night he had to party. On my birthday one year, he insisted on throwing me a celebration. We went to this narrow diner where there wasn't a lot of room to move around with a bunch of the boys. The waiter brought out the food, and Andre went up to the door. He held it shut and let out a big fart. Everybody was choking, and Andre was laughing his ass off. Eat it, he said. Do you think it smells nice? Needless to say, I lost my appetite. When we left dinner, Andre was still gloating over his rib and handed me a piece of cake. You forgot to finish it, he chuckled. Ho, ho, ho. Ho, 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 your balls, I said, and threw the cake in his face.